You just made a decision. Right now. You decided to keep watching this video instead of scrolling away. You feel certain that choice was yours. But the real answer is far stranger. Your brain made that decision before you knew you made it. Not a little before. Almost half a second before. And in that half second, something else was steering. Something older than language. Something that doesn't ask your permission. This isn't a theory from a self-help book. It's a measurable finding, tested in a lab, repeated for decades. And once you understand it, you'll never trust the feeling of choosing the same way again. Most people walk through life assuming there's a tiny commander sitting behind their eyes, weighing options, then issuing orders. Eat this. Say that. Turn left. It feels obvious. It feels undeniable. It's also, according to some of the most cited experiments in modern psychology, not quite what's happening. In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet ran an experiment that quietly broke the idea of free will. He wired people up to machines that read electrical activity in the brain. Then he asked them to do something simple. Flick your wrist whenever you feel like it. No pattern, no pressure. Just whenever the urge arrives. Here's the part that should unsettle you. Libet's machines detected a spike of brain activity, a readiness potential, building up before the person felt the urge to move. The decision showed up in the brain first. The feeling of deciding showed up second. Your conscious mind wasn't choosing, it was finding out. Think about what that means. You believe you are the author of your actions. Libet's data suggests you're more like a narrator, describing a movie after it's already been filmed. Why does that feel so wrong? Because your brain is extremely good at building a story where you're always the one in charge. Later researchers pushed the experiment further, using brain scanners instead of simple electrodes. Some found signals predicting a person's choice up to several seconds before the person reported deciding. Seconds, not fractions of a second, long enough for the outcome to already be settled while you were still under the impression the vote hadn't been called yet. Scientists still argue about exactly how to interpret these numbers. Nobody argues about whether the pattern is real. This isn't just about wrist flicks. It runs much deeper into how you handle temptation, pressure, and identity itself. In the late 1960s, a psychologist named Walter Mischel sat 4-year-olds down at Stanford University, one at a time, in a small bare room. In front of each child, he placed a single marshmallow. He gave them a choice. Eat it now, or wait alone in the room, and if you can hold out until he returns, you get 2. Some children lasted seconds. Others twisted, sang, sat on their hands, stared at the ceiling, anything to avoid looking at the marshmallow. A few made it the full weight. Mischel wasn't just measuring willpower that day. He was measuring something almost nobody thought to measure. What decides who resists? Decades later, Mischel tracked those same children into adulthood. The ones who waited longer tended to have higher test scores, better stress management, stronger relationships. That finding became famous. It got repeated in commencement speeches, business books, parenting articles, until it hardened into a simple moral. Strong kids wait, weak kids grab. But here's the twist that got buried in the pop science version of this story. It was never really about willpower at all. The children who resisted longest weren't gritting their teeth harder. They were the ones who changed the game without realizing it. They looked away. They imagined the marshmallow as a cloud instead of food. They distracted their own brains before the craving could take over. In other words, they weren't controlling the urge. They were rerouting around it before it fully formed. That single detail connects directly back to Libet. The urge builds beneath awareness. By the time you feel it, the wave is already moving. The children who succeeded weren't fighting the wave head-on. They were changing the shape of the shoreline before it arrived. Isn't it strange that the secret to self-control isn't strength? It's timing? Now here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. If your brain can decide before you know it, and if temptation builds before you feel it, how much of your personality is even yours in the moment it appears? A psychologist named Philip Zimbardo asked a version of that question in 1971, also at Stanford, and the answer terrified him. Zimbardo took ordinary college students, screened for having no violent or unusual psychological history, and randomly assigned them to be either guards or prisoners in a fake jail built in a university basement. Nothing about these students suggested cruelty. They were selected specifically because they were average, stable, unremarkable. Within days, the guards escalated. Humiliation, sleep deprivation, psychological control tactics nobody taught them. Some prisoners broke down so severely, the study had to be stopped early, after only 6 days instead of the planned 2 weeks. These weren't bad people. They were placed inside a role, given a costume and a title, and their behavior reorganized itself around the situation almost automatically. Modern psychologists have since raised serious questions about how the study was run, including how much Zimbardo, acting as prison superintendent, may have shaped the guards' behavior rather than simply observing it from a distance. That criticism matters, and it belongs in the story. But even the harshest critics tend to agree on the underlying signal. Ordinary people placed inside a strong enough situation will act in ways that feel completely unlike their own personality and feel completely justified the entire time. Zimbardo didn't need to teach cruelty. The role taught it. The uniform taught it. The mirrored sunglasses that hid the guard's eyes, removing any trace of individual identity, taught it. Strip away someone's name and give them a title instead, and the situation starts making decisions the person would never have made walking in the door that morning. Put those 3 findings side by side and a pattern starts to surface. Libet showed that your body moves before your mind claims credit. Mischel showed that the urge to give in builds beneath conscious awareness, and only rerouting early can change its course. Zimbardo showed that the environment around you can silently rewrite what you do, often faster than your sense of self can object. So where does that leave the version of you that feels like it's driving? Here's the part your brain doesn't want you to notice. That feeling of being in control isn't a lie exactly. It's a summary. Your mind is constantly running processes you never consciously chose, then stitching together a clean story afterward, complete with reasons, justifications, and a confident narrator who insists it was in charge the whole time. Psychologists have a name for this: the interpreter, a part of your brain whose entire job is to explain your behavior after the fact, whether or not the explanation is accurate. This is why people can confidently explain decisions that experiments later prove they never actually made. In split brain studies conducted by neuroscientist Mischel, patients whose 2 brain hemispheres had been surgically separated would perform an action triggered by one side of the brain. Then, without any awareness of the real cause, the other side would instantly invent a plausible reason for the action. Not a lie. A genuine, sincere, wrong explanation, delivered with total confidence and believed completely by the person saying it. One patient's right hemisphere was shown a snowy scene and told to pick a matching card, choosing a shovel. His left hemisphere, the verbal half, had no idea what the right hemisphere had seen. When asked why he picked the shovel, he didn't say, "I don't know." He said it was for cleaning out the chicken coop on the spot, without hesitation. His brain didn't want an unexplained action sitting there. It wanted a story, and it built one instantly. If your brain can do that in a laboratory, under observation, what is it doing to you right now, every day, without a lab in sight? Think about your last impulsive purchase, your last argument you didn't mean to start, your last late-night scroll that turned into 2 hours you don't remember choosing. In the moment, it felt deliberate. Afterward, you had a reason ready, but the reason might have arrived after the decision, the same half-second too late that Libet measured on his machines. Modern technology didn't create this gap between action and awareness. It just learned to exploit it. Every app that refreshes with a small delay, every video platform that cues the next clip before you finish the current one, every notification timed to land during a quiet moment is quietly working with the same half-second Libet discovered. Not against your willpower. Underneath it, where willpower doesn't even get a vote. This is not an excuse to stop trying. It's the opposite. Once you know the urge builds before you feel it, you can do what those successful 4-year-olds did without knowing the science behind it. You can reroute early. Change your environment before the craving fully forms. Put the phone in another room before the wave hits, not after. Decide your response to a stressful message before you open it, not while your thumb is already hovering. You cannot outmuscle a wave that started before you knew it existed. but you can choose the shoreline in advance. And that reframes the entire question of control. It was never really about willpower in the moment, because by the moment you feel the pull, the deepest part of the decision has already happened. Real control lives earlier than that, in the small quiet setup choices you make when nothing feels urgent at all, the room you choose to sit in, the people you choose to be around, the habits you build before you ever need them. This also changes how you should judge yourself and other people in moments of failure. The version of you that lost his temper or gave in to the craving or froze under pressure wasn't a weaker version of you fighting a fair fight and losing. He was often fighting a battle that had already been decided somewhere beneath his awareness, seconds or even longer before he opened his mouth or reached for his phone. That's not an excuse to stop caring about your actions. It's a more accurate map of where the real leverage is. So tonight, when you feel certain you're choosing something, pause for half a second. That's roughly how long your brain kept the decision to itself before letting you in on it. You still get to steer. You still get to build a life that reflects who you want to be. But the steering happens earlier than it feels, in the quiet architecture of habit and environment, long before the moment you call a choice.